Will Quentin Grimes be back on the Philadelphia 76ers next year? And why in the world is Guerschon Yabusele suiting up for the New York Knicks? Those are the two biggest questions that have emerged from the early stages of this offseason. And to his credit, Sixers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey has faced the music, speaking to the media while out there for NBA Summer League out in Las Vegas. I want to dive into exactly what he said about this situation, how they directly were interlocked there, and why we got a couple other interesting sound bites there discussing the injury status of VJ Edgecombe, the vision for this roster as a whole, and a couple other interesting things to get into. But to keep it on the Quentin Grimes and Guerschon Yabusele conversation here, do want to start with this tweet coming from the Philadelphia Inquirer's Keith Pompey, who tweets, Sixers president of basketball operations Daryl Morey on giving Quentin Grimes the offer he deserves, impacting the team's ability to retain Guerschon Yabusele. Quote, I think people have said like that created a challenge for us, and it's true. So we want to retain Quinton. We hope to work that out with his representation, and our focus was on making sure that happens. That did impact what we could offer Guerschon. Now, to interject here a little bit, I do want to pull up the same quote, phrased a little bit differently or cut a little bit differently from Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire here. But to interject on this specific topic is Daryl also drops a little bar in here saying that they did offer Guerschon more than the veterans minimum. Now, that has been what has been reported out there. Guerschon himself took to the mic and kind of spoke up that he felt a bit insulted, that it felt like that the Sixers did not want him back based on what was being offered in his direction here. But Daryl sort of fighting back about this. Now, we've gone through this process and the way that it has worked together quite a few times over here on Sixers Digest. And we know the order of operations that things had to go down for things to work for the Sixers from a salary cap perspective, as Quentin Grimes needed to sign on the dotted line before they could offer Guerschon Yabusele what the Knicks did there. That is unfortunately the way that things shook out. And obviously, there are some, problems with the Quentin Grimes negotiations. The biggest factor of it, him being a restricted free agent. In general, and still in this case, that's very advantageous to the team that has that player. The Sixers can directly match any offer that is sent his way. But the difference being here, there has not been an offer that is sent his way. There are not these teams pushing the boundaries and trying to lure these restricted free agents in a way that has been the case in past years. That this restricted free agent label is something that I think sounded great in theory. Now that it is in practice after quite a bit of time, it just is not quite working out as designed. And I think that this year's class with Quentin Grimes, with Josh Giddey, with Cam Thomas, Jonathan Kuminga, those are good basketball players right there. Those are guys that should not just be sitting out there with zero interest in, but that is how things have gone down, basically because of the restricted free agent tag. Now, to continue on the Quentin Grimes story and conversation here, I did want to pull up this next portion coming from Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire that he writes, in terms of Grimes, the restricted free agent market has dried up. It appears he will be headed back to Philadelphia, but the two sides have yet to strike an agreement just yet. That side of things affected the Sixers' ability to retain Yabusele, as Philadelphia wants to give Grimes the offer he deserves. Quote, I think people have said like that created a challenge for us, and it's true, Morey added. So we want to retain Quinton. We hope to work that out with his representation, and our focus was on making sure that happens. That did impact what we could offer Guerschon. And to continue on, as far as Grimes is concerned, Morey and the Sixers are just waiting to come to terms on an agreement as everybody moves forward. Quote, we've had discussions recently with his representation, and we hope to work things out. I don't have much more detail. So not a lot of help from Daryl on the timeline that we are working with. The bottom line here being is Quentin Grimes is going to be a member of the Sixers next year. I'm pretty certain about that, unless something out of the clouds, a sign and trade opportunity or a team really emptying the Brinks truck to bring this guy to their organization there. I don't really foresee either of those situations popping up, but they are obviously sorting through things. That for Grimes specifically, this is sort of a tough spot for him to be in here, that he could theoretically take the qualifying offer and bet on himself to I can really cash out when there are teams with more cap space or more opportunities next year. But do you really want to do that? That is a guy that is already on his fourth NBA team, has yet to find any sort of stability in the league. And when you look around at the Sixers roster, it's going to be competitive for minutes this year, man. The VJ Edgecombe is going to be knocking. He's going to be looking over your shoulder there. Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, you guys probably can't all share the floor together, so you guys are going to be competing for minutes. Now, speaking about them sharing the floor together, is Daryl Morey was asked directly about that. Now, a lot of times when these questions pop up, that he does a nice job sort of brushing it off to Nick Nurse, saying this is a Nick Nurse question. This is a coaching question. Don't bother me with that. And he sort of did the same here, but I thought there was some interesting quotes to pull up. And he was asked on Morey on whether or not Maxey, McCain, Grimes, and Edgecombe can all play as much as they'd like to in the distant future. And Morey says, quote, again, probably more of a Nick question, but I do know in my conversations with Nick, Nick does a great job. He's generally going to put the best players players out there, and those 4 guys we think will likely be 4 of our top players on this team. Coach Nurse is very creative. I would expect that he would find ways to get all those guys pretty heavy minutes, assuming health and assuming VJ plays as well as we hope in his first year. Again, expectations are super high on VJ, as they should be. We're very excited about him, but I will say it is super rare for a first-year player to come in and play on a team that has championship aspirations, so trying to temper them a little bit with VJ and give him a little space to maybe have some bumps in the road this year. But I do think that in our best version of our team, if we can get Quinton back, all 4 of those guys will be playing pretty heavy minutes, and Coach Nurse will have to use creativity to figure out how to best utilize them. And he also added, Morey on the team's decision not to trade the number 3 overall pick. He said, quote, "It's an excellent question. It's obviously something that we considered and looked at, which was different ways to use the number 3 pick. We sort of weighed the different factors and offers and decided that picking VJ was the best way to go. It's a reasonable question, just sort of dependent on offers we got and overall how we felt about VJ." And he also went into a little bit of detail about that workout that created plenty of buzz there about VJ looking nervous or not shooting the ball there. And he said he wasn't surprised that the leaks got out, that there were quite a few people there, which is a bit of a surprise to me. It has felt from my perspective here and from what I've heard from the behind the scenes workings here that there has been a tighter circle within the Sixers front office and the way that they go about things compared to past seasons here. So no clue who was fully in attendance there. But the point being, and the bottom line of this is, you're not going to take how a guy shoots in that type of setting, in that workout environment with the pressure on, over what he's done over the sample size of a season and really his lifetime as a basketball player. And Morey was also pretty open on what really sold him on VJ was seeing a bit of his personality, the way that he wants to work, the way that he fits in with the personnel that they already do have in place. And that was all some pretty convincing and positive things to read, I would say. Now, speaking of VJ Edgecombe here, we still have quite a few questions about the status of the 3rd overall pick, because he obviously shined in his summer league debut, and we have not seen him on the floor since. So we got a little bit of an update here coming from Daryl Morey, as he was asked about VJ's injury, and he said, quote, "Yeah, so he hurt his wrist, sort of a day-to-day thing. He did parts of practice yesterday, and it'd be more today and see how it feels. So yeah, we're hoping to have him be back out there." Now, everyone's excited, including us and VJ, mostly VJ. VJ is the most annoyed by this. He really wants to be out there, and our medical staff is trying to be smart about it. And he was asked if he expects Edgecombe to return in Summer League, and Morey said, quote, "I frankly don't know. It's really going to come down to symptoms, and I understand, we just went through a whole season of that. So I have empathy for everyone, but especially when it comes to, an off-season exhibition, I think it makes sense to be even more on the cautious side." So obviously here with VJ, if he is truly injured, there is no reason for him to be on the floor. But the more telling part of this quote is him mentioning it's a wrist injury. This has been labeled a thumb contusion and a thumb sprain to the public to this point. So what is the exact deal that is going on with VJ? Now, it is on his non-shooting hand, and in the long run, I don't think this is anything to panic about by any means here, but still a little bit of another example of the Sixers organization just not quite being on the same page when it comes to all of this here. Ultimately, I do hope we get one more look at VJ Edgecombe. I will say they are straight up unwatchable without him, that it has been a brutal summer league since he has gone down there. Pretty lifeless games and really not a lot of standout performances. Shout out to the Judah Mintzes and the Dem Bonas of the world. Even Janai Broom having a couple flashes here and there. But the reality is, this has not been the highest quality of basketball, which is a huge letdown after I was excited to see some Sixers hoops again. Now, the final quote that I did want to pull up here is just about the state of the roster as a whole. So Daryl Morey was asked, quote, how he feels about the state of the roster, and he said, quote, "Well, I think we went in with the goal of being younger and more athletic among the group that we think will likely be on the floor. I feel we've done that. I think around Joel and Paul, I think pretty much every likely rotation player is 27, 28, or younger. So yeah, we're looking forward to that and optimistic on where things are with Joel. So yeah, looking forward to next season." And to interject on this a little bit, I guess we're just forgetting the Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry signings. Now, if I want to view this optimistically, maybe that means they don't have a plan for it. I'll even throw Andre Drummond right in the same conversation here. Maybe that they are not assumed to be in the rotation. But we also can't ignore the fact that those guys were on roster, or are on roster heading into next year. Now, he was directly asked about each of those guys here, and Daryl sort of pushed back a little bit. He was like, Eric played well for us before he got injured there, dealt with some wrist and hand issues. Kyle himself battled a ton of injuries throughout the season. I don't know what he can say in that case outside of the fact that, he's kind of going against his word that you can't do both of these things. You can't get younger and more athletic and then sign 47-year-old Kyle Lowry and 54-year-old Eric Gordon. That is not quite how things work from a math perspective here, but nonetheless, I do hope that these guys are both essentially just leadership positions, glorified coaches on the Sixers roster, and that the young guys can carry the torch from here. But ultimately, good to hear from Daryl Morey. I do respect and appreciate him stepping to the podium, taking the heat a little bit, and acknowledging things head on. But there are still some loose ends to tie up with the Quentin Grimes and Guerschon Yabusele conversation. I don't think this is a situation where we should have this vitriol and hatred toward Yabusele when he does return to Philadelphia in a Knicks jersey. I understand. I hate the Knicks more than anything myself here, but I think we can acknowledge here that Guerschon, he had the money in front of him. He had a better offer, and this isn't a guy who, at this stage in his career, based on already failing out of the NBA once and this being his second chance, you got to take that money where you can get it, and I do understand that from his perspective. I do wish it was on any other basketball team in the National Basketball Association, but nonetheless, I get it from Yabu's perspective, and that isn't anything that I'm going to have this hatred for him directly because of here. So we'll see what happens here. Hopefully, a signing of Quinton Grimes in the near future. I would like this saga to be wrapped up. I do get the sense it's going to continue to drag on for probably a couple more days, possibly weeks. There does not seem to be this momentum towards this deadline, or this is going to happen then, but nonetheless, we will roll with the punches here on Sixers Digest. So shout out to Daryl Morey to step into the podium and providing a little bit of clarity across the board there. Shout out to you guys for tuning in this video here. As always, if you have not already, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button, hitting the like on this video here, dropping your comments below. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.